Welcome to the video version of my journal. I'm Steffanie Rivers. Come on into the conversation. I am multicasting on several platforms, including Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn. So, on whatever channel, whatever platform you're watching, we want to welcome you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. Thank you to my current subscribers. So, before we jump into it, let me turn down my music. Here's what we're talking about today. There are 3 U.S. banks that have collapsed within 1 week of each other, and it didn't take long for some people to deflect, trying to protect their own image and to start blaming diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI initiatives of all things, instead of placing the blame where it should be. I'm here to set the record straight. And I will address my voice. I'm getting over a cold. I'm going to try not to push it too much. So I know you won't have a problem understanding me, but I'll try to make this column an adult version of Schoolhouse Rock. Remember, I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. And we learned a lot about that. So if you are too young to remember, then don't worry about it. We'll move on. This all started the week of March 6th. There were 2 banks within 2 days of each other with mostly cryptocurrency depositors. They went out of business because their customers took their money and ran off. Now, the third bank to collapse was Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. Now, this bank got its charter 39 years ago. In October, it would have been 40 years. Now, it was the go-to bank for venture capital backed tech startups. It chugged along for about 35 years. And then in 2020, when the conventional businesses were closing due to the big pandemic, tech companies were taking off. So Silicon Valley Bank's balance sheets went from $55 million at the beginning of 2020 to $186 million by the end of 2020. So that's more than 300% growth in 1 year. So what did Silicon Valley Bank do with all that money? Well, they invested in 0% rate bonds. Now, it costs nothing to purchase those bonds. So the bank was banking on the fact that bond rates would be going up at some point and they would make money. But here's the thing, interest rates went up instead. And bonds and interest rates work like a seesaw. Remember those things, the seesaw? When interest rates go up, bonds value go down. So Silicon Valley Bank got stuck with valueless bonds and they lost millions of dollars. Let me do that, put that up. So Silicon Valley's bonds became valueless and they lost millions of dollars. But instead of focusing on getting more depositors to balance the in-house reserves to investment ratio that all banks are required to have, the president of Silicon Valley Bank made the mistake of making the bank's complicated status public knowledge. Depositors showed up and withdrew their money. It's called a run on the bank. And that caused the bank to fail. Now, if you haven't already, you should read The Creature from Jekyll Island. That gives more detail on how banks are supposed to work. It's about that big, but it's really good. It helps you to understand more about the banking industry. Now, instead of working the accountability angle and blaming bankers for having their focus to be like toddler-like pre-object permanence, you know how toddlers, you put a ball in front of them and then they'll try to get that ball, but as soon as you take it out of their focus, they move on to something else. These bankers were acting like toddlers. They were not focused on what was to come or getting prepared for what's to come. Instead of blaming the bankers, Wall Street Journal columnist Andy Kessler decided to speak on it by blaming the bank's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. In other words, the bank's collapse is the fault of Black and brown people. Now, what in the hell do we have to do with rich white men using other people's labor, other people's money, then trying to invest it to make more money for themselves and their families? Well, if you put it like that, I see the connection. But Kessler said Silicon Valley Bank was too preoccupied with its DEI initiatives. He also cited the board's diverse makeup of the board as having as being one of the reasons. Now, Kessler said that 12 white men would have been more focused on the money. Now, while I agree that 12 white men would have focused more on controlling other people's money, controlling other people's property, and taking over other people's power, here's the thing. Silicon Valley Bank opened branches all over the world, including in Indonesia, in China, and where else? Israel, Indonesia, China, and Israel. They in Denmark, a lot of other places. So it purposefully sought deposits from Black and brown people. So it seems only fair that the board should reflect that. Andy Kessler, hey, Andy Kessler, stop with your colonizer mentality. We see you. It's 2023, not 1923. I bet Andy Kessler is also against San Francisco's plan for reparations. Now, when I was in school in the 70s and 80s, I remember when local television stations used to end their programming for the day at midnight, and they played the national anthem and they put up color bars. Remember that? And they wouldn't come back on until around 6 a.m. So they took a break. They finished their programming. They didn't have anything else to say. They took a break. These days, there's always something to watch, always something to listen to, always something to read, even if it's bullshit. In other words, or in the words of Mark Twain, it's better to keep your mouth shut and appear to be a wannabe colonizer than to open it and remove all doubt. That's what I have for you. To find out more about the things that I care about, you can go to the written version of my journal. It's at eurweb.com. Thanks and have a